Scheffler overcomes the putter. Charlie Hull finishes second, and Matteo Manassero cures his yips. Welcome to another Monday Night Live here from the Precision Golf studio. Simon and I coming at you every Monday at 6 p.m. Thanks for joining us. Big weekend of golf.
Yeah, I mean, Manassero's finish, that was 11 years after his last win. Couldn't believe that when I heard that, but 4 birdies in a row to finish. Very impressive. Great to see him back at the winner's circle.
Yeah, Josh Antman, a client of mine who works with, does the Sky Sports podcast. He was saying he had an interview with the head of the players last week, and he said that the guys said no chat about the putting, don't ask any questions. So clearly feeling it, you know, at the very highest level of the game. Guys and girls are following social media, following the magazines, what they're talking about. And if you think you got it bad when someone knows you've got a bad case of the chipping yips, if you know the whole world knows that not necessarily got the yips with the putter, but you can't hold putts, I think that's a burden to carry around with yourself. And he's done it very well. So great to see him win. Charlie Hull, our very own, came up short, unfortunately, but crikey O'Reilly gets on a flight last night, arrives back into town from the US this morning and back in the gym with Kate this afternoon.
Yeah, I thought I was dreaming. I was like, have I gone back a week or so? Yeah, straight in the gym. Very impressive. And you know, tough conditions that last day. Watched a lot of it last night, and you know, 3-4 club wind. You know, she had a bit of a stumble halfway round, but then picked it back up to finish second and birdie a few of the back nine. You know, and the young German guy looked really impressive. He's won a couple of times in the last few months as well. So
yeah, very much.
Good.
Matteo Manassero, have you heard the journey he's been on with the battle with his long game? A
certain amount, yeah. I mean, I know he tried to put in a lot of speed. He was always very consistent, but not long. And so tried to kind of build some speed up and hit it further. And I think, if I understand correctly, struggled keeping his game in check with that. And so great to get him back in the winner's circle.
Very much so. We've got two very special guests on this evening. We've got Gary Orr, 20-year veteran on the DP World Tour, now Seniors Tour winner, and his sports rehab in Stuart Robertson, our very own chiropractor here at Precision Golf. And the other special guest we've got on, Barney, the 10-month-old Cocker Spaniel that's coming up later on. So do stay tuned for that. And as usual, of course, we've got the plethora. It's going to be carnage. There's going to be balls and clubs going everywhere. We've got the discs standing by. James is sitting back, drinking martinis and smoking cigars as we speak. 4 microphones. He is stressed. I just hope the lease goes to Bert. No, I don't really. So if you want to ask...
stress him out a bit. He's had it too easy the last few weeks, hasn't he?
So do let the questions come in. So without further ado,
He's trying to get on camera now.
Let's get Gary and Stuart on. Okay, he's running around. He said, not yet. Are we okay to go now? Yeah. Okay, without further ado, let's get Gary and Stuart on. Welcome along to a little Monday Night Live.
Obviously, Stuart's coordinating belt and shoelaces.
Yeah. And what's your excuse for coordinating with? No, you actually very.
No, as usual.
So great to have you on, Gary and Stu. So your relationship dates back for sort of 7 or 8 years ago when Gary was battling with the old chassis, the back.
Yeah, still am, but not as badly.
Not as badly. And was that something that happened very early on tour, or was that something that was really came in the latter years?
Yeah, it started on and off fairly early, 5 or 6 years, and then it got worse and worse, and then I didn't think I was really going to be able to play on the senior tour. I was really struggling with it, and I started playing a bit more again, trying to practice for it. But fortunately, about 2 or 3 months before I started, I found Stuart, and he put me on the right path. Yeah.
And the problems that Gary had, is that something that you see common with different levels of golfer, i.e. like high-level players or just your average golfer? Was it specific to Gary?
I mean, more with high-level players in the specifics of what Gary had, but more than 50% of golfers regularly suffer with back pain. So everyone who plays golf knows a friend, if not themselves, who've had significant episodes of back trouble. So, you know, each episode is slightly different. Each individual may have a slightly different presentation, but it's certainly a very common problem to have.
And from a player that, you know, earns his living through moving his body quite quickly and well with a golf club. Obviously very frustrating to having to pull out of events and being in the middle of what could potentially be a great round of golf. Did you have to get to a point where you're actually pulling out of events?
Yeah, it's happened a few times.
Yeah, mid-event. Any times when it was going super well and you had to pull out? Or was it already you're in?
Yeah, sometimes right before the event, or sometimes after. Just in the middle of a round. Sometimes it would happen. So, fun enough, one of the times was Manicero, who just won this week. I'm playing with him at the Scottish Open, the last round, halfway around. So it gets a bit. It's tough going when that's happening.
And having had a bit of back problem myself, do you feel it coming on? Can you feel it starting to manifest itself when you start to give Stu a call and say try and get him booked in, or does it come usually from a bad swing or a shot? Yeah,
I mean both. I mean sometimes you can feel it niggling and building up, and then other times it's a bad swing. For me it's the sort of hips out and forward and head back and crunches the lower spine, and that's normally not a good one. No, for sure. And so what have you done to help Gary along on the road?
I mean, initially it was fairly acute, wasn't it? You weren't able to hit too many shots without it spasming and ending up in an antalgic shifted position like this.
Yeah.
So we worked on loosening out muscles that had obviously developed the sort of Russian doll effect of the different layers of muscles that had splintered and guarded a lot over the years. So we had to unwind those tight muscles and release some of those compensations out. And then we did a little bit of manipulation of Gary's lower lumbar spine on a few occasions, and then we started to work on trying to get a bit more symmetry, because you'd had a disc problem back, was it about 2010?
Before that, I think 2007 it started.
Right.
Yep.
So down Gary's left side had pain shooting down into his foot, and that really inhibited his glute muscles, and they didn't ever seem to quite recover. So we found there was quite an imbalance there, and that with testing your core muscle endurance ratios, you were relatively asymmetric, so we had to try and balance that out. So pelvis and the muscles around here, the obliques and the QL muscles that really stabilise the spine on the side, and try and rebalance those, which you've done a very good job of, and so we keep tabs on that and make sure that things aren't getting too out of kilter and not tightening up too much again.
And of course when you get a bad back, the body's very clever at hiding it initially, right? And then it starts learning new patterns of movement, which then all of a sudden you see shoes looking a little bit different, and the way your trousers can wear and all that kind of stuff, it can be really weird. And it's only when it starts to get to an acute stage that all of a sudden the problems flare up. Did you feel anything changing before you started to have a bit of a bad back, or was it just something out of the blue?
Initially it started out the blue. The first time I ever did it was playing in Germany, and I'd been practicing for some reason, sort of trying to tilt my pelvis a bit forward. Don't ask me why, and I was hitting the ball nicely, but that's maybe why. And then the next day I was supposed to be playing the Pro-Am, and I couldn't play, and I had to pull at the tournament. That was the first time that happened, and but then it didn't happen so frequently back then. But you definitely make adaptations over the years to try and
very much so.
You change and protect yourself from the bad swings, and sort of find ways around it, but not always the great way of doing it.
And that's the trouble, isn't it? I mean, if you make a particular swing that's not particularly good for your body, but it works quite well with a club and a ball, right? I mean, it's a bit of an issue, isn't
exactly,
it? You're kind of butting yourself up against a brick wall, and it's difficult because you're trying to find something that's good for the body, but still yet can win tournaments. And you won twice on tour.
Yep.
Your Portuguese Open and the British Masters.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about those two events. What stage in your career were they?
That was after I'd been tour for about 6 or 7 years. So I'd had some good finishes, finished second a few times, so I had a few near misses. And Portugal was the first one. I made eagle at the last to win, with the last group out with Phil Price. And,
at Penina? Par 5 uphill?
Uphill, I had a great second shot in there to about 7 or 8 feet. Phil Price was one ahead going down the last, and he drove it in the rough, and I got 2 great shots on and hold it. So I haven't never let it Never let him forget it. Yeah.
He's a super nice guy. For
Yes,
the price
yeah, I
as well,
see him. He still plays really well. in the seniors,
ruthless
yeah.
with
Yeah.
with a fairway wooden
Yeah,
hybrid, is he
yeah,
not?
really,
I mean,
yeah,
just
yeah.
knocks the flag out. And of course, the other one at Woburn. I mean,
Yep.
which course would that been on?
It was the Duke's course at Woburn,
Okay.
so tight and tree lined, and I had a great second round. I shot 62 in the second round, so
How?
I was.
Is that barely
yeah.
possible, really?
I've played it since, and I still do. It was one of those days. I mean, I can remember the last hole I was playing. I started in 10, so finishing on 9. I'd driven it on the edge of the trees and had to cut a 3-iron round under the trees just to chase it up, and I lipped out and finished like 6 inches behind the hole. So
Sure.
when you're having those sort of days, yeah. But I played with Monte actually the last round, and he threw a few birdies at me, but I managed to hang on.
Pushing back,
Yeah.
yeah. And life now, seniors tour, obviously very competitive out there because you've always got the older guys sort of dropping off the back,
Yeah.
and then the younger ones coming on the front,
Yeah.
which is quite well, I mean, I suppose it's similar on the main tour, but of course you've got a sweet spot of between 20 and maybe 35, haven't you? Whereas on the seniors tour, you kind of got maybe 4 or 5 years of the sweet spot, potentially. Not the case for maybe someone like a Harrington that's more in the public eye now with senior tour golf. But how have you found the adaptation and the different maybe mindset of senior tour life?
When you start, it's great because you feel really young again, because you've gone from playing, feeling old on the regular tour to all of a sudden, oh, that's great, these guys are
You
all
look
really
old.
yeah. And then, yeah, so it's great, and you're back competing against guys you've played with all through your life, really. So.
And still ruthless?
Yes, I mean, every day's, they get, some of them practice as hard as they've ever done. I mean, I try and take it a bit easier and go easy on the body, but some guys are out there pounding the ball still, till it's dark still. So, yeah, guys are really, take it really seriously. It's not as relaxed as you'd imagine. Yeah.
And of course, it's still the generation that were sort of Woosnam and obviously Monty and Faldo and, maybe not those guys, but they were having a bit of a beer in the evening and, the Torrances of the world and kind of stuff. A very different angle on what golf is now. Does that still go on? Is it a bit of a society travelling the world that are great golfers, obviously, having a good time and playing some nice championship golf, or does it still feel like they're trying to win each week, would you say?
It's a bit of both, I think,
Yeah.
the seniors, because that generation was a bit different from what it is now. When I started in the tour, it was more of that. We'd meet up in the evening, every day would have a couple of beers or whatever, but when the money got bigger, that changed. And but the seniors is a bit more like that, because you're meeting up old friends a lot of the time, and so it's a bit more relaxed, but still, it's a good balance, I think.
And so moving forward for Gary's body, what does it look like in terms of getting older and maybe degenerative side of things? Because we're all getting older and we're all getting a little bit more hurt.
Yeah.
What does it look like? As long as Gary knows the prognosis.
Yeah.
Do you
No,
maybe
no
step
secrets.
out
Sit
the
down.
room? We'll get the wine out.
Yeah, that's it. Relax the
Yeah.
muscles. Well, I mean, really maintaining many of the things that we've focused on previously, and making sure that you stay nice and mobile in the thoracic spine, mobile around the hips, good, stable, strong trunk and back muscles, and then strong in the legs. And if all of that's in balance, then there's no reason. Gary's always had good flexibility, and so that's not a problem. Yeah. So
Well, we were only saying before we came on how mobility is such a key thing. There's obviously this general kind of strength in your core and legs, but if you haven't got range of motion with golf, you're really struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah, not easy at all. So for people out there that might be battling with backs, is there something that, I mean, other than going and seeing someone obviously and having a little bit of investigative work, is there a common trend that you tend to see, sedentary life obviously in front of computers, not necessarily getting out there and working on some mobilisation? Is there a bit of a 101 of what people could be doing to maybe free themselves up to a level?
Certainly up to a point. I think the key thing is, if you think back to human movement and anatomy, the key areas for rotation are really in the hips, and then looking at the back, it's in the thoracic spine. If you're
the thoracic spine, you
it's
refer
the
to
mid-back,
the
the
mid-back,
mid-back.
yeah.
So going down into the lumbar area, the joints are basically vertical, so they can really move forwards and backwards, flex and extend really well, but there's very little scope for rotation in them. So if you start asking those joints to rotate because the joints above and below aren't moving sufficiently well, then you run into problems. And so, yeah, if people are sat poorly like this for 40, 50 hours a week and they've got really tight hip flexors and hamstrings and relatively weak abdominals and weak glutes, then they're often struggling. So basic things just to mobilize the thoracic spine and the hips, and that includes a warm-up. Really important, and just
ruin everyone Sunday morning.
Yeah, well, I mean, only has a cup of coffee. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, five minutes of well invested loosening up on a certainly before you go and play, but if possible, you know, on a few occasions during the course of the week, really can pay dividends. Otherwise, you're asking your body basically to do the antithesis of what it's been doing all week, and that. Ultimately, you might get away with it for a while, but you know, if you continue to do that, and particularly if you're wanting to progress with your game and you're working on hitting lots of golf balls and things, then you're starting to push your luck slightly. So I think it's important to bear that in mind.
Yeah, and we've sort of come out of the generation of sort of holding hips still and turning back against it. I know, I seem to remember back in the middle. Fan of yours. I mean, I used to have lessons off Lee, one of my early golf coaches, and I even remember back in the day a bit of a Ledbetter drill of like knees apart, you know, ball in between your knees and turn against your lower half, wasn't it? Resist, hit against your left side. All of this stuff that's so bad for us, and yet we see it. You know, the kind of the 40-year-olds and above really that have come from that generation are still sort of in the shadow of that, whereas we see younger golfers now with massive hip turns, much lesser separation values between upper body and lower body, which is far better for us than it is trying to load the spine, right? And so for the guys and girls out there, they should be encouraged to move more with their lower half than trying to just turn their upper half, and especially you know, when we're in the winter time as well, when they've come out and it's freezing cold and they're on the first tee trying to rip a driver down there, it's really not good for them.
No, absolutely not. And yeah, absolutely, I completely agree with that. And you know, when you think that 60% of the power in the golf swing comes from the hip muscles, you want to make good use of those. They are the biggest, strongest muscles of the body, the gluteal muscles. And so, you know, making sure you're in a position to utilize them really effectively, the same with the quad muscles, you know, and then obviously if you've got a nice mobile thoracic spine, you can just, you know, use that rotation. But of course, yeah, the hips are moving, and then you can use the combination of the rotation of the hips and the torso with the extension at the hip and the knee, and that hopefully delivers lots of power at the bottom of the arc where you want it.
You've probably got too much power these days.
Well, that's it. That's right.
That's what actually we kind of, all of us as golfers forget. You think people talk about golf as being kind of quite a kind of an easy pace sport, and you're kind of strolling around, but actually the amount of strain and effort and energy through your body and the range of motion that you're trying to put it through, it's you know, it's a vast range of motion to ask your body to do if you're not preparing for it in any shape or form, whether it's, you know, stretching, loosening up, you know, any kind of gym work. You know, to step up on on a Sunday morning, having run from the car park and expect to do something half decent, it's just not going to happen.
Absolutely, and joints don't like end range loading, going to as far as they can go. And if you're doing that repeatedly and then under strain, you know, for most people, top of the backswing may well be end range loading. And then if they get, you know, the classic sort of pelvis thrusting towards the ball and the extension, and they're thinking about their head, and you say, well, it's not your head, it's everything that's connected to it that's the issue. You know, if you can then rotate here, the problem is lots of people end up this way, and of course they're compressing the facet joints down in the lower back enormously, and there's only so far that they can continue to do that. And then you'll see chicken wings and all sorts, you know, from a coaching perspective. But in terms of the dynamics of what's going on in the spine and the hips, you know, that's not going to be great. And then, you know, awkward positions for that left shoulder as well. So, simple things like that. I think the other thing you were looking at, you know, or asking about simple things that people can do, if they can't just get to what we'd call a wall angel position here as a right-handed golfer, people say, oh, I keep struggling. I've always been across the line, you know, can't get the club on plane at all. And you look at how much external rotation they have in abduction here of the right shoulder. If you can't get back here, then of course well, you're always going to be across the line because you simply don't have the range of movement. And you know, if you can't do it statically, you're never going to do it at 100
comes in with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, yeah, that's
Can't
right.
open themselves
Can't
up.
open themselves out.
They need a good chair. That's what they need to do.
Well, that will help. Yeah, that's right. Ergonomic chairs.
We'll get you straightened out.
Get you
No
straight,
problem,
that's it.
no problem at all.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, so just finishing up with, I mean, it's obviously great to be able to pick the brains of a tour winner. For youngsters out there that are watching, what would you say is the biggest asset that you had for staying out on tour for 20 years? Being able to, you know, that's 20 years of making cuts, being in the top 100 on the order of merit, and being able to thrive really under pressure, because you are doing that every week. Was there something that you felt, do you know what, I'm really good at X, and that made me stay out on tour? What would that be for you? What would be your X factor as a golfer?
Well, I think you got to play to your strengths. So I was always pretty straight off the tee, and it changed a bit over time with different things. But I think you've got to try and base your game around your strengths, I think, rather than trying to worry too much about your weakness. Obviously, you have to look at them and tidy things up, but try and, as you know, have your strategy based around the strengths of your game, play to your strengths, and try to build up confidence that way. I think that's a huge thing. So
Well, it's an interesting point, isn't it? That when we all talk about, you know, get better at the weakest parts of your game, I think obviously at the elite level, you're invariably not losing a golf ball off the tee every time.
Not if you're winning.
Hopefully not.
Not if you're winning at Wembley.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And you know, you're not fluffing chips, but what you are doing is you feeling confident about a certain part of your game, and if that might be your wedge play, or with an 8-iron in your hand, or taking on holes with a driver, that's something that you can build your strategy around over a round of golf. And I think we get pretty caught up in now, particularly with statistics, always working on the weakest part of the game. And I think amateur golfers could learn a little thing or two on actually building their strategy around the good golf that they play.
And I think the other thing is to try and, if you're practicing, try and make your practice as productive as possible. Play little games, you know, set yourself little challenges. Try to make it like you're doing on the golf course, so that when you go out on the golf course, it's not, you know, one thing and then a completely different thing.
And do you thrive on that nervous adrenaline that you get? You know, sometimes you can see the old head shaking.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy that state?
I think you do. I think it's worse before you go out and play, I think. But once you're out there, I think it depends how you're playing. You know, if you're playing well, then it's good. But if you're not playing so well, it's a struggle. But so I think it depends on your game. I remember I was an old pro, Greg Turner from New Zealand.
Yeah,
he said he felt more nervous trying to make the cut than he did trying to win tournaments, because his game wasn't quite as good. You know, it's a bit of. I
remember standing. I mean, you relate to this. What a lot of people would say, the hardest tee shot on tour was the first at Wentworth. Yeah. And I remember seeing him Greg Turner stand on the tee and whip one onto the putting green in between a few players. You know, I mean, you know, if you feel uncomfortable, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you feel uncomfortable and you can't see a shot, who knows what's going to go on at the moment that you pull the trigger.
It's a funny tee shot there, because you get people right behind you and then a road in front of you. And a big tournament as well. So.
Just out of interest, Gary, you obviously won twice on the main tour and then won twice on the seniors tour. The converse of that, rather than being nervous, when you're super confident, obviously you've had a run where you won back-to-back on the seniors tour. What does that feel like, and how do you then try and tap into that sort of positive energy and just the confidence in your game that you just know that you can hit the shot?
Yeah, well, I think having good results builds that up a bit, so it almost takes the pressure off a bit. So to me it felt a bit like, well, I've played well, so if it doesn't go so well, it's no big deal, sort of thing. So that sort of eased the pressure a bit, I think. Okay. But so you can imagine what it must be like to somebody like Tiger, who was winning every other week, just through the roof. So, pressure's a funny thing. You handle it well sometimes and not well other times. It's but I think, again, back to your game, if your game's good, you feel more confident. Even though you feel the nerves, it's a positive thing. If your game's bad and you're nervous, then that's a struggle then.
We've got a question in, Stu. Do you have any exercises to guarantee I can shoot 65 every week? Just joking. Do you have any exercises for arthritis in both shoulders?
arthritis in both shoulders. I mean, to be honest, it depends a little bit on how severe it is.
Yep.
I think I would have to say you can't really give specifics in that situation, basically because there are different joints. Without going too much into the anatomy, there are actually 3.5 joints effectively in the shoulder. So it may well be referring to the glenohumeral joint, but it could also be the AC joint here. Yeah, exactly. So it gets a little bit complicated. The shoulder's a really complex joint because it's got phenomenal range of movement, mobility. But that's a trade-off with stability. And so we need to make sure that the supporting muscles, the rotator cuff, are strong. So working on basic exercises for the rotator cuff in a range of movement that's comfortable with all of those things is good. And then just some very gentle mobilizing in the pain-free range can be useful, but it's quite easy for people with osteoarthritis, wear and tear arthritis, to do too much. So I think the other thing is it's worth knowing your own body, because you'll probably be aware when you're having a flare-up and when there's a bit less capacity for doing these things. And then other times, and it can often be really difficult for people to put their finger on exactly what it is that's flared it up or whatever it is that's allowed things to settle down. But gentle, regular movement is the answer. But yeah, I'm sorry to sit on the fence. Yeah. I'm getting splinters right now, but it is very difficult to give specifics in that situation, because the last thing I'd want to do is cause this person more pain or soreness on the basis of taking my word as gospel. So
well, when it flares up, 2 YouTube channels that you can sit at home and watch the content. Shameless plug. well, listen, chaps, it's been super interesting having some insights on certainly your journey and the help that you've been given by Stu. We really thank you for your time and insights.
Pleasure, thank you.
Gary,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you. Well done. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Big thanks to Stuart and Gary there for joining us on the Monday Night Live. And if we have any further questions coming through, we will be sure to pass them on. So we've got plenty of questions. We've got plenty of questions.
Quick draw McGraw.
At this point, we need double-handed questions coming in. As usual, we've got the 2 iPads in front here, and any questions you have. A couple of requests for Barney. He's going to be joining us at the end of the show. He's got some insights on his new food. And
I hope he doesn't.
And his new toilet. Anyway, so it was a little bit soft, so we had to change his food. Anyway, sorry if you're eating your dinner. Peter Caller, evening gents. I had another visit to PG on Friday. We're going to start charging you, Peter. Joking. The final part of my full bag fitting. Lovely to have you back down. Followed with a lesson with Lewis. As always, an amazing experience at PG. Thank you, Simon and Lewis. It's our great pleasure.
And Peter, very brief. Peter's very apt having Stuart and Gary, because Peter's had gone through some pretty major sort of physical challenges over the years. And if I can swing it like him at any point later in my life without the troubles that he's gone through, I'll be very, very pleased with myself.
That's great to hear.
Lovely chat.
Peter Caller goes on to ask us, Stuart, any tips on getting the left hip rotating back on the downswing? Gary, how do you deal with mentally with your back problems during your golfing career? Well, I think he gave us some good insights in how he's come through that with the aid of Stuart. So in terms of hip rotation, I think we've all been down the route of believing that the speed in our pelvis comes through our middle. Actually, the most common way of golfers now feeling like they can open up their hips is their leg length. So I would always recommend feeling how the pressure goes from the toe to the heel and how that left leg will lengthen, because when the left leg lengthens, it either flexes and shuts the hip off and lengthens and opens the hip off. That would be the easiest way to start to feel more hip action. And the other thing you might want to contemplate is where your arms are in space, depending on whether your arms are quite flat or they're a little upright, and depending on whether your face is open or closed will affect how your hip opens. Because obviously if you open your hips up a lot and you have a club face that is closed, it's going to pull you across the golf ball and hit some pull hooks. And then if you layer that on with wanting to get more from the inside, all of a sudden your hips shut down because you're thinking about from the inside. So the hip action in its single entity is something that, yes, isolate it and improve on it, but you might also want to look elsewhere as to why that might hurt or hinder you. Hope that is of some use. Mr. Ace, what a good handle that is. Hello from Canada. Good evening and welcome for joining us. Looking at T150, trying to decide between the Project X 6.0 120 and Modus Nippon 120 stiff. Can you compare the two? Even better if you swing with a low 120 ball speed. Thank you very much.
Right.
Get yourself off. Get yourself off. When Simon comes back and starts hitting, I'm going to get the monster out, little Barnabas, and we'll see what he has to say for himself. Gary Satterfield, lovely to have you along. He is joining us. He's on his vacation. You got me for the whole hour, and I'll try not to annoy you guys too much. You never annoy. Jeff Berger, which mechanics are best to focus on in order to have a square putter face at impact? The best two components, and I'm not going to give you one, I'm going to give you two components. First of all, get yourself a alignment aid. Visio Putting is a great place to go. Check out their alignment aids. That would be the first one. And then you want to start to think about the acceleration of your handle in the change of direction. If you think about the putter head when it's swinging back, if you suddenly have a strong acceleration of the handle, what will end up happening is, because of the angle that you're swinging the putter head on, if you suddenly accelerate the handle, your face will then open up. So I think the two biggest ingredients of good putters is good face alignment at the start, and then the change of direction in stroke really allows you to square the putter face up. Any thoughts on your putting stroke that you've applied over the years, Simon?
I try not to think too much. I think putting wise, I think it's very easy to overcomplicate it. As you said, alignment is key. The face alignment at impact will override anything else you're doing with your stroke from a start line point of view. So that's something worth remembering. Yeah, don't overcomplicate things. Keep it nice and simple. Tempo's key.
Head down, listen to it drop.
Yeah, if you can't aim straight, you're not going to hit it straight.
100%.
So
100%. Had another question in there. Chi Therapy. Hi guys, watch or viewfinder? Absolutely a viewfinder every day of the week. The GPS watch is only as good as the GPS guy that went and plotted the golf course.
Right, Modus 120. So actually, Modus 120 stiff is 114 grams, so it's 6 grams lighter than the Project X. And going to feel more responsive because, oh, that was going right, because the butt end, the grip end is softer. That's what happens when you don't warm up, because the grip end's softer, so you're going to get a little bit more responsiveness. I'm going to feel the shaft load and kick a little bit more.
What do you think of that, Barney? He's not that impressed, to be fair.
I don't blame him.
So those of you that might have seen one of the shows, goodness me, 5 months ago, 6 months ago.
Hello.
This is Barney. He's 10 months old. He's a working Cocker Spaniel, and he's an absolute lunatic. Big shout out to our trainer, Hampshire Spaniel Training. He's our 10 months old, as I say, 10-month-old Spaniel, and he is an absolute monster. I bring him in with a couple of days a week. Sits in the back of the bay. We've got him crate trained, and he's an absolute cutie. He's no problem at all. Runs around, likes the odd golf ball. We're trying to train him out of the odd golf ball.
Do find the odd golf ball with a tooth mark in, don't we?
Yes, that's right. And of course you've got Doris. Of course,
we have Doris the pug. She's 8 months old now. And yeah, great. Fabulous.
Yeah.
Love it a bit.
So our trainer said the working Cocker Spaniel is the ADHD of the dog world, and he certainly is a little that way, but he's certainly calming down.
Yeah.
But he's doing super well, aren't you, Barney?
The one thing I will say is that this is not a good coloured trouser when you have to take the dog in the garden early on and they jump up at you.
Not a good dog. A little bit of whining, so we'll let Barney back. Say hello to the audience.
So
say hello.
The Project X 60, a little heavier, and really it's how you move it. The heavier shaft weight of the Project X versus the Modus means you're going to have to work a bit harder to get it through the ball. It's stiffer through the midsection, so you're going to feel a little bit more stout, and generally need a little bit more kick in the swing to get the best from it. That's gone right as well. So if you're more of a hitter, the Project X is likely to feel a bit more stable and give you a bit more to hit against. If you're somebody who's more tempo-oriented, the Modus will feel a bit more responsive.
Fantastic. For those of you that aren't aware, Stuart, our chiropractor, he plays off scratch. Very good golfer. It's like...
Very obviously practices what he preaches based on the wider shoulders and the waistline.
I know. Disgusting, disgusting. Been adding, Keith L 2022, been adding weight to head of grip on driver, 65x plus 9 grams, head plus 27 grams, grip, path, face to path are close to 0, little no effect. Is this crazy stick and play? Help me avoid massive hooks. What are negatives?
So if I read that right,
You'll be
been
doing better
adding
than I
a
am.
lot of weight to the club. So if you've added 9 grams to the head, 27 grams to the grip, the problem what you're doing is you're just making the club heavier and heavier and heavier without actually focusing the weight in a particular place. So you're bookending the weight, heavy grip end, heavy club head. So the 9 grams in the head, that's 4.5 swing 8 points, 27 grams in the grip end is 5 swing 8 points. You're basically the same swing weight, but you're 36 grams heavier. It's if you're neutral, it's a neutral path. If I get it right,
A little on
effect on
backspin, side spin.
spin.
Is
Base
this
the
crazy
path off
stick
close
and
to
play?
0. The problem is there are so many different reasons why you might be hitting hooks. It's a very tough one to answer that, but I would say if you're having to go to that extreme length, then something with the club setup isn't right.
If your face to path is 0 and you're hitting big hooks, you're whacking it out the toe. That would be the biggest one.
Yeah.
That would be the biggest one. Papa B, hello gents. Could you please hit? You're going to be busy tonight. Please hit a ping fairway wood in the standard setting and flat setting, and explain who the flat settings are best for. Thanks and cheers.
Okay, it won't make a lot of difference, but
Yep.
I'll grab it and do it.
While Simon is off running, we need that. Remember, challenge Annika. That's
I'm not
what we
wearing
need.
spandex.
Well, I need you in a little jumpsuit. That's what we need. So, Bama number 1. Good evening, gents. For either one of you, do you think speed stick training aids can hinder the feel of the club head, or will this require an adjustment to club head speed swing weight? Well, effectively, if you're swinging the club faster, you are going to make the club lighter, because as you're pulling it, it's going to feel like it's swinging lighter because you're getting stronger. So the feel of the golf club will effectively change. So depending on how much speed you go up, you might want to then think about getting a little bit heavier in the golf club, because effectively if you're moving it quicker, you're getting stronger. And if you're getting stronger and you are fit for a golf club at 95 miles an hour, and then you suddenly go to 105, 110, all of a sudden, the club is no longer the right weight for you. So that's something to consider. Any thoughts on that, Simon?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It's not just a speed thing; it's how you're moving it. So ultimately, from a fitting point of view, you can be moving it 10 miles an hour quicker, but if the way you're developing that speed is the same, you might not need to change. If you're putting more energy into the handle, if you're pulling on the handle more rather than just moving faster, that then is when the club is likely to need to change. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Austin asks, hi Stuart, can you discuss the position of the right forearm elbow when gripping the club? Not sure if the elbow should feel tucked where the forearm should be pointed. Yeah, I can quickly do that for you. So for me, how you place your right hand on the golf club will go hand in hand with your left hand. If you are a weak gripper of the golf club with your left hand, not my preference, but you certainly wouldn't want to have where I'm about to ask you to put your right hand if your left hand is weak, because that will make your grip double weak and the face will be wide open. So if you've got a decent left hand grip, and if you, shameless plug, go over to my YouTube channel and check out my grip series playlist, you will find out how to grip the golf club. But the right hand, for me, I like to see the palm of the hand pointing down to the ground at address here, very much in the fingers of the right hand. And from there, I like to see the right elbow pointing down to right hip. And with the positioning of the hand on the golf club, what you'll start to feel is how that right forearm starts to externally rotate in your backswing, which will make it feel like your right shoulder sits down more. When your right hand sits more under, you'll see how the elbow will almost point to my belt buckle. So the right hand position on the golf club will affect where the elbow is going to point, and it will change the way your forearm rotates. Both of those things will have to be balanced up with your left hand. So I can't give a one size fits all, but what you need to understand is your left hand, if you've got a strong left hand, you need to have a bit more palm down. If you've got a weak left hand, you need a bit more of a palm up. But for me, if you've got a weak left hand, I'd be checking that first of all. But hopefully that gives you an idea of where you need to be looking for the right hand.
Right.
Have a go. So we've got this is the ping fairway wood.
Ping fairway, standard setting.
This is standard setting, then we're going to go to the flat setting. Yeah, lovely.
So, yeah, standard. A little bit low on the face, probably spin a little bit, but square. So, the lie, when you're looking at this little loft, the lie is not going to influence start line very much. Not a huge amount. It's a bit like with a putter. You can change the lie many degrees at 2 or 3 degrees of loft, and because there's very little effect on the actual kind of way where the face is looking, it doesn't change start line. So primarily, when we're putting the line a flatter position with a fairway wood, in theory, it's going to slightly gear the start line to the right. But actually, if you get someone who's got a lower hand position or who's 5'8" rather than 6'2", then you're getting more of the club face flush to the ground. So if it's too upright, then you're basically only giving yourself the heel side to strike with, whereas level it off and you've got the whole face to get into the bottom of the ball with. So for someone who's a shallower plane or is either a little bit shorter height-wise or hands a little bit lower, then it lets more of the club face get down to the bottom of the ball. And I'm sure I was just thinking about it. There we go. So I've opened the face up a little bit with that, but essentially that's me, not the club. The flatter lie is more about getting it visually sitting a little flatter and giving yourself more of the face to strike with. In theory, it helps guard against a overdraw miss, left to the left if you're right-handed, right if you're left-handed. But for me, I'd use it more about getting more face near to the bottom.
I really like that jumper and shirt combo.
Well, thank you very much.
No, I really like that. So, I just thought I'd throw that in there. As you go, no. Barney just whispered to in my ear. So I do like the way Simon's dressed this evening. As you guys, Kyle Millwood, as you guys know, if you play irons at D3, then go to a shaft that's 10 grams lighter. Do you stay at the same swing weight? Wondering if it's relative. Also, what sand wedge progression in irons is your build?
So if you drop 10 grams, if all you do is drop 10 grams in shaft weight, the swing weight will drop by a point. So swing weight isn't absolute. It isn't the kind of, if you're D3 with one shaft, then you're not going to be D3 with every single shaft. It will change a bit and might require just a little bit of fine tuning and working out. Chances are you drop 10 grams, you'll go from D3, probably play more like D2.3, 2.4. To keep the feel for the head, but it depends on the shaft. Sand wedge progression, if you're at D3 on the 6-iron, the pitch wedges like to be around D4. Sand wedge, if you go up in shaft weight, more like D4.5, D5, roughly that kind of ballpark.
Lovely answer. Gary Satterfield, hey Stu, can you share your biggest mistake you ever made while caddying? I think you must know the answer to that. So my biggest mistake whilst caddying, how does he know about this?
I have no idea.
I talked about this on the TV blog.
You talked about whacking a flag back into the hole and getting it stuck before, but that wasn't
caddying. No, that wasn't caddying. So this mistake, I was caddying for Nick Doherty in the Czech Open, and we're coming up the last hole. I think I've done this in the video. Anyway, I'm coming up the last hole, and as a caddy, whoever's the last player to putt takes the flag, or whoever's putting out, their caddy will hand the flag to you. So I've said, oh, don't worry lads, I'll just put the flag back in. And so this is the 18th. Flags on the front of the green. So everyone's putted out. I've got Nick's putter under my hand, but I've also got the flag under my hand, under my arm. And I walk back to the bag.
Good.
Friday evening, we're missing the cut. As usual. Sorry, Nick. And the stands are full. So I walk off the back of the green and there's no flag in the hole. The players in the middle of the fairway have shouted up the hole, "Put the flag back in," or words to that effect. And so I had to go across the green with the flag and stick it back in the hole while the whole gallery was chanting. So thanks.
This sort of colour?
Very
Sunburned.
similar. Very similar. Thanks very much for that, Gary. Really appreciate that. Have a beer on me. So where have we got here? Good evening, lads. What fitting system do you guys use for connecting head and shafts together?
So we use a company called Club Connects. With the woods, there's a Unifit system where we've got an adapter that goes into each head. That means we can use the same tip, so kind of a one size fits all. And similarly on irons and wedges, there's a system that we grind a little bit off the hosel, put on, so we can put any shaft in any head.
Majestic. Nigel, I didn't miss you out. I just came back in at the wrong place. Nigel, hi. Can you show the difference between the QI10 5-wood to the 7-wood, please? Off he pops.
Righty.
Off he pops. I'll jump back over to my channel. Martin Williams, can't wait to see Barney. Well, the young lad has been out. Graham Murray, yes, bring on the pups to Stu. Well, hopefully you enjoyed that. My sister says, Suzanne C, my Barney bear is there. Can't wait to see the main event. Suzanne C, Gary's on the vodka again. Yes, I am. Just Diet Coke though. Mike T, thoughts on lab putters? Seen lots on tour. Simon?
The principle is torque balanced. So what that means is that the shaft goes into the head and that the head balances around the shaft plane. So there's no gearing from the face on the stroke. What it generally is good at is holding out, because there's no kind of rotation. So on shorter strokes and on quicker greens, and if you've got a decent stroke, they're generally good. A lot of players struggle a bit more on the longer putts. So on slower greens that we get over here in the UK, especially this time of year where they're running about 3 on the stump, it's quite hard to get a feel for distance, but they're not a cure-all. They're just a bit of a hot product at the moment, which is why a lot of players play a double bend or a short neck, because it gives a bit of feel, vertical feedback for where the putter faces.
There must be an iPad holster, don't you think? There must be something out there that you could just slide a couple of iPads in on the belt.
There's some braces that hang over the top.
The iPad holster,
very fetching.
coming to Amazon soon. So we're going to give this a little whop between the two woods. Your swing's getting a workout tonight, isn't it?
I didn't do any warm-up swings today.
Yeah. Christian Diamond says, evening gents, what shafts are similar profile to the Oban Kyoshi White and also the KBS TD shaft?
KBS TD is pretty unique in terms of profile and feel. It's actually quite a hard one to really compare it to that much from a feel point of view. But I mean, the Kyoshi White is stable midsection, a little bit of response in the tip, so you'd probably be looking at something like a Ventus TR Red. Yeah, maybe the UB graphite design as well, but probably the TR Red's the most similar. The TaylorMade KBS TD shaft. So it's quite a hard one to replicate, certainly from a feel comparison point of view. I would say it's a bit like sort of a slightly stiffer tip version of an IZ graphite design, but so it feels a lot more stout than most. So,
if you're new to our Monday Night Lives, we are here every week at 6 p.m. Simon and I taking your questions on all things golf equipment and golf coaching, and with a few guests along the way. Gary Satterfield has kindly asked when my sister is going to start up her own podcast on the stories of Stu when he was growing up. Isn't that nice?
I'm glad he didn't want to mention the clogs.
Yes. So.
Right, 5 wood. So generally TaylorMade fairways are quite strong for spin. So, that was a stiff back, that was low on the face. Let me do it one more.
Very straight though, Simon.
Yeah, a little low on the face, so it spun up a bit, but let's give it one more there. a little more launch. So tend to be good for getting a bit of launch but keeping spin down. So for a lot of players, the QI10 5-wood actually spins like a 3-wood, so that was a bit heavy but took a lot of spin off. But plenty of launch, 16 launch. We go to these, we've got a slightly lighter shaft, and we go to the 7-wood. Launch angle up a couple of degrees, spin up 600-700 revs. So yeah, you can expect to see from a flight point of view, good 2.5 degrees extra launch angle and spin. Yeah, certainly 20% higher, 600-700 revs higher.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for that, Simon. As usual,
I'm assuming that was the comparison required.
Beautiful demonstrations. We've got 9 minutes left. Get those questions in nice and early, chaps and chapesses. We'll do our best to answer them all. W. Rob S01, good evening, lads. What fit? Oh, I've already asked that question. Forget that. Mike T, can you compare a heavier driver shaft in a lighter swing weight compared to lighter shaft with a heavier swing weight? What are the differences? Maybe what are the differences rather than...
The differences are going to be that a heavy shaft and a light swing weight, essentially in terms of delivery, is more likely to get a little behind, but then it lets you fetch the head through. So if you go too heavy, it results in a flip left most of the time. But then if you're reversing that, light shaft, heavy swing weight, then the whole bottom end's dropping behind, and it's the head weight that's dropping behind on you. So if you're someone who kind of has a tendency to miss left, but a sharper, kind of quicker transition, then often a lighter shaft, heavier swing weight can help to keep the handle out in front of you and leave the face open and not go left. And then vice versa, you don't want to go too light if you've got a right, potentially too right if you've got a right hand miss, but bring the balance up the shaft so that you can recover the head.
Yeah, very good. I'm going to have to stop Gary and my sister chatting on here because I don't like what they're concocting up here. Graham Murray asks, hi Stu, what do you see in Scheffler's swing that creates such a straight ball flight most of the time? I see a great delivery pattern. I see a golf swing that has not been coached, overthought. And what I do see him working on is a good golf grip. For those of you that aren't aware, it was back last year at the Masters, and I saw on the range Scotty Scheffler having a grip aid on one of his golf clubs, and he was practicing with it. And I said to Nick, he was doing it in the studio, I said, text him, I said, go check out Scotty Scheffler's he's practicing with a grip aid. And I think, after all said and done, you put your hands on the golf club well, you will have way more awareness of where the face is pointing. And if you think about when we're talking about TrackMan data, 2-3 degrees can mean quite a lot of difference. If you were to put your hands on the golf club 2 or 3 different degrees different, for whatever reason, 1 week to another, it could be disastrous for a tour player. And I think when you've got someone that is so driven by obviously the way he holds it and not being overcoached, I think that's his X factor of being such a repetitive golfer, in my opinion. Any thoughts on Scheffler and his application on the golf course? Do you like the way he plays?
I'm baffled by how he
nearly fell over the other week at Pebble Beach.
But I think part of it is it's like a lot of it happens after the ball's gone. But he's clearly, the club is on a great line. His fundamentals are really there. The guy's an absolute athlete and strong as an ox. So he can hold that form through the shot. If you or I tried to do that whilst hitting, we'd be all over the place.
I've seen that before.
So this is like Morris dancing, isn't it? But I think ultimately his fundamentals are great, and that you've got to go back to that each time.
Absolutely. Jeff Berger asks, what's the best way to control depth of sand in greenside bunker shots? Posture. When you're hitting the bunker shot, it's so easy for you to feel like you go down for it. The thing that you need to have is you need a posture to swing the golf club off. So I would always try and promote a feeling of almost back extension through strike on a bunker shot, so it feels like you've now got something to swing the golf club off of. So it gives you the sense that the foundation, the base of the swing is consistent. It's so easy for people to overset it in the way back, and then all of a sudden they don't get rid of it, but also they don't get rid of it and they go down for it, and before you know it, their nose is hitting the sand and the leading edge is digging in. So good posture through a bunker shot is really crucial for that. Von Everett, evening chaps. Simon, what effect on swing weight would adding a heavier, lighter grip, and how, if any, would that affect ball flight?
Ball flight's going to be dependent on how it affects what you're doing with the club head, but 5 gram change in grip weight plus or minus is a swing weight point. But you're also changing the total weight of the club. So one of the things we're really keen on is when we're going bigger than standard to a mid-size, a lot of the standard grips are sort of 50 to 55 grams, a lot of the mid-sizes are 60 grams plus. That has a huge effect on the way you're able to move the club. You wouldn't change shaft weight by 10 grams. So that's something to be really, really careful of. And swing weight is not an absolute number. So just if you are changing grip, be careful of how much weight you're changing.
Absolutely. Martin Williams says Barney is beautiful. I have a 5-month-old St Barnard. She's a handful too, but we would not be without her. Absolutely.
I bet she's more than a handful.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Suzanne says, Simon, can't wait to see the latex outfit with the clogs. You must let me know the colour so we can coordinate.
Perfect. I mean, look, changes daily. Changes daily. Harlequin.
But don't worry, Suzanne, I'll send you his number and you can get on top of that. Glenn, 400, question for Stuart. When it comes to shallowing the club from the top of the backswing, what methods have you had most success from in your lessons? Shallowing the golf club is obviously a very big topic. It will probably occupy most of your feed. Shallowing the golf club, the idea behind it, or the reason for it, is that the club is going to have some way of approaching from the inside. Now, the easiest way to feel how a shaft shallows, take the golf club in your left hand and feel like you move the handle and your chest in and around yourself. And when you do that, what you'll start to feel is the shaft stand up. Then as you start to move the golf club down, as you pull the handle forwards, what you'll start to feel is the shaft go from stood up to laid down. Now, this is one way of shallowing the shaft. The other way golfers think about shallowing the shaft is driving the handle down this way. Now, if you drive the handle down, can you see how the shaft is standing up? So there's two ways you can shallow a shaft. Depends whether you're trying to shallow your arm plane, or should I say two ways to shallow a golf club. Either you're trying to shallow your arm plane or shallow the shaft. So you need to fix which one you want to do. I would never think about shallowing arm plane. I would always try to shallow the shaft. But when you get that shaft shallow, you need to make sure that you're moving the golf club around you. Easy for me to say. So handle in with my left hand, lift it up and pull it forwards, and you'll start to see the shaft shallow. Just depends where you want to go with it from there. If you go inside out, that'll create shanks and slices. Wouldn't do that. I would really make that handle move around you. If you haven't seen it, check out my broom series on my channel. That will give you a super insight into how that club works.
She sells seashells on the seashore.
Don't. Lucky I didn't have my false teeth in.
Very impressive to say that without a trip.
Without a trip. Keith L 2022. What are golf equipment setups to encourage a fade, anti-hook shot, swing weight, total weight, loft lie, grip, etc.?
Yeah, all of the above. I think it depends. There are so many different ways of doing it. It depends. There'll be one way for me, another way for Stuart, another way for you. Flatter lie, technically, that helps a little bit. But there are some players that are lighter shaft and a heavier head will help to open the face up. There are other players that actually, like Matt, who's a big hitter here, if he gets behind him, he whips it around and hooks it from there. So it really is very player dependent. So there is no kind of magic kind of cure-all for it, sadly.
I'm getting nowhere near that one. Gary and Suzanne.
I noticed there was a lot of activity.
There's a lot of activity going on there. We're going to back away from that. So we've got a couple of minutes left, and we're going to get through as many of these last questions as we can. Adam Holt. Hi all. I know iron shaft doesn't necessarily dictate driver shaft, but it is some kind of indicator. On that basis, what aftermarket driver shaft would match up to my KBS C-Taper Light S?
So 110 grams, C-Taper Light S, so mid-weight, balance in the tip end. If you want something that's going to feel fairly stable with that, VA Composites Drago 65 stiff. That's a good benchmark for that.
Love the way you roll, just reels off the tongue. Niels Axelson, good evening, Niels. Nice to hear from you this evening. Great with visitors again. You are welcome. Barney. That's how we spelled it.
Really.
Yeah. Liam Hancock, Titleist mini driver hitting the conforming list. Thoughts?
See whether it launches. Just because it's on the conforming list doesn't mean it's coming to market. It might be a tour-only product. Mini drivers are generally, they're not generally a mainstream product, so it'll be interesting to see whether they launch it completely or not.
Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't checked out our teamchallengetrophy.com website, it is an event that's going on in May at the Costa Navarino Resort. There are still spaces there. Do head over and check those out. We would love for you to come and join Simon and I and the other pros and the teams on that event. So do check that out if you haven't done so. Golf Nerd, did you guys tune in to Live Hong Kong? Really epic final round with the chasing pack and huge turnout. I did see some of it, did you?
I didn't, unfortunately. I'm aware of the playoff and I think Anthony King's last round as well.
5 under.
Answer Casey and Cam Smith. Great box office playoff.
Yeah.
I think we're just seeing that tour building and building and building.
Yeah, big time, big time. They're really great, gaining some momentum there. Liam Hancock, lead tape to putter for slow greens, a bit of a myth or something to it. Well, again,
myth. You've got to mummify your head and lead tape to make a substantial difference, because what you're doing is you're saying, right, on slow greens, heavier putter head, more momentum, more ball speed, but you've got to put so much weight on to make a substantial difference. You'll throw your timing off more likely than improve your putting, so just hit it harder.
Good advice. Neil Campbell, we're going to take up to Tim G. We're going to get through up to Tim G's. So Neil Campbell, evening gents, what do you think of the Wilson AI fit system for club fitting?
Honestly, not something I wouldn't want to comment in depth on. It's not something I'm overly aware of. We're not currently retailing Wilson products, so it's not something that I've seen.
Good answer. Kevin Taylor. Hi guys, what is the most used driver shaft on the LPGA Tour?
LPGA Tour. Ooh, that is a good question. That I'm not 100% sure.
That's right.
Yeah, don't know actually.
So, just wanted to make sure I said this right. Sash Manswag. Don't want to say that too quick.
No.
Because that could end up with a whole career finished on YouTube and Sky Sports. Guess who's back? Don't know. Guess who's back?
Eminem.
Eminem.
Anthony Kim, I'm imagining.
I can't imagine he's back. He's back. Dan Chiavello, good morning from Australia, gents. Love this channel, and we love you being here, Dan. Tim G, anything else similar to Fujikura Motore XF3? I find the Ventus line to be too stiff in the tip.
Yeah. I mean, the Motore X range, particularly the F3, is a little bit more responsive. So if you're going through the models, something like the Acura, the FX 100 range, a C6 Blue in the Mitsubishis, that would certainly that would certainly work. In the Motores, I would also look at one of the Tensei, the blue Tensei 1K blue. That would be another one for that.
Very good. And you're absolutely right. I do remember now. Sash Man Swag 1 username of the day last week. Yes, you did. Well, that's rounded up a super evening. Lovely to have Stu and Gary on the show, and of course the mighty Barnabas. Again, we're in full swing here at Precision Golf in all facets of our business. What have you got on this week? Just more fittings,
just more I mean,
development?
February, March is a busiest period, so it's really just getting as many people through the Dara and through the bays as possible.
Any standout equipment at the moment?
The Callaway Fairways have been very good this year. The Paradigm, Paradigms last year were good. The AI Smoke Max, particularly the 3HL, the forward, that's been really good. Other than that, there's a lot of really good across the board stuff. It's hard really. I've been impressed with the Cobra driver, the Dark Speed X. The LS isn't that forgiving, but the X has proven really good for spin.
They've been a bit of a sleeping giant for the last few years, though, haven't they?
They're underrated. I think they've done good drivers for a while, but they've gone away from the crazy colours. So I think that might kind of help make them be taken a little bit more seriously. Their fairways are good this year as well.
Brilliant. Well, we are back next week. Not sure who we've got on the show, so stay tuned for our community page to find out more on that. Big thanks, as I say, to Stu and Gary, Simon and Barney, and thank you for joining us with all of your questions. Have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you next Monday, 6 p.m. Be there.